Sold to hell by her own father, the young Apache fled crying until she found a cowboy. The young Apache girl lived in a small, dusty village far from the cities. Her home was simple, made of wood and clay, but it held warmth and memories. She loved to run across the open fields, chasing the wind and listening to the songs of birds. Her world was full of laughter, the soft voices of her family, and the smell of fresh bread from the small kitchen in the evenings. Life, as she knew it, was peaceful, and she felt safe with her family. She had grown up under the watchful eyes of her father and mother. Her father was a man of many words and stories, someone who could make her laugh when she felt sad. Sometimes he would tell her tales of brave warriors and spirits of the mountains. She would sit by the fire, wide-eyed, imagining herself as one of those brave heroes. Her mother, gentle and kind, always looked after her, making sure she never went to bed hungry or cold. At night, the girl would lie on her small mat, listening to the soft sounds of the village and dreaming of adventures she might have one day. But life has a way of changing quickly, and happiness can sometimes be fragile. The girl had never thought much about the dangers in the world outside her village. She had believed that as long as she stayed close to her family, nothing could hurt her. That sense of security was broken one evening when she overheard a conversation she was never meant to hear. Her father was talking to a man from a distant town, someone she did not recognize. The man's voice was rough, filled with greed, and her father spoke in a way she had never heard before, cold, businesslike, and cruel. She crouched behind the wooden wall of her home, listening in fear. He was talking about her, about selling her to someone far away, someone who did not care for her life or happiness. She could not believe her ears. Her father, the man who had sung her to sleep, who had held her hand and promised to protect her, was the one planning to send her into a life of suffering. Her heart pounded, and tears began to fall down her cheeks. She could not understand why her father would do such a thing. The world that had always felt safe and warm now seemed dark and frightening. Her mind raced with questions. How could he betray her? Why would someone she loved so much want to hurt her in this way? She felt a deep, painful sense of loneliness, as if the ground beneath her had disappeared. For the first time in her life, she felt truly afraid. The night grew darker, and the wind whispered through the trees, almost as if it was echoing her fear. She thought about running, about escaping before it was too late. But where could she go? She knew the forests surrounding her village were wide and dangerous, and she had little food or water. The thought of leaving the only home she had ever known filled her with both fear and desperation. As she sat in the shadows, her small body trembling, she remembered the stories her father had once told her, stories of brave warriors and clever spirits. Those stories gave her an idea, a tiny spark of courage in the middle of her fear. Maybe she could be brave too. Maybe she could find a way to escape, to run far away from the man her father had chosen for her. The tears that had blurred her vision slowly gave way to determination. She knew she could not stay another moment in that house. Each second was dangerous. She waited until the house was quiet, until the men's voices faded, and then she silently packed a few belongings, a small cloth, some bread, and a flask of water. She did not take much because she knew she had to move quickly. Every sound in the night seemed to shout at her to run, and she did not want to wait any longer. The girl opened the wooden door and stepped into the cool night air. The village was silent, and the stars above shone brightly, but their light could not chase away the darkness that had taken over her heart. She moved carefully, trying not to wake anyone. Each step was heavy with fear, but she kept reminding herself why she had to do this. She had to survive. She had to escape the terrible fate her father had chosen for her. The path ahead was uncertain. She knew she could not go back. There was no one she could trust anymore. Her father, the person she had loved most, had betrayed her. Her mother, gentle and kind, would not be able to stop what had been decided. The girl realized that if she stayed, she would have no choice, no freedom, and no hope. But if she ran, she had a chance, however small, of finding safety. As she moved into the darkness, the cold wind bit her skin, but she ignored it. Every sound, the rustling of leaves, the distant howl of a coyote, made her heart race. She stumbled at times, falling into soft dirt, scraping her hands and knees, but she kept going. With each step she felt a mixture of fear and courage. The world outside her village was frightening, but staying meant certain suffering. The unknown, though terrifying, was better than the life her father had planned for her. Hours passed, and the girl did not stop. She did not dare rest because she knew that danger might come at any moment. She walked through open fields, through small streams, and over rough hills. Her small body ached, her feet were sore, but her mind refused to give up. She remembered the stories of spirits who guided the lost, and she whispered to them, asking for protection. In the quiet night, she felt a tiny warmth of hope. Even as she ran, the memories of her childhood haunted her. She thought of her mother's smile, the songs she had sung, the laughter shared with friends in the village. Those memories made her heart ache, but they also gave her strength. She realized that she was not just running from something terrible. She was running toward something better, toward life and freedom. Finally, as dawn began to break, painting the sky with soft shades of pink and orange, the girl found herself on the edge of a small forest. She paused, exhausted, her body trembling from fatigue and fear. For a moment she let herself cry, letting out the pain she had carried all night. But then, wiping her tears, she knew she had to keep moving. She had survived the first night. She had taken the first step toward freedom, and she would not stop now. The forest ahead was dense and dark, but it promised cover and safety. She could hide from those who might try to find her. With one last look at the field she had run across, she took a deep breath and stepped into the shadows of the trees. Her heart was still heavy with sorrow, but it was also filled with a quiet courage. She was alone, yes, but she was no longer helpless. As the young Apache girl disappeared into the forest, the village behind her seemed like a distant memory. The wind whispered through the leaves, and the birds began to sing, as if welcoming her into the wild world beyond her home. She did not know what lay ahead, only that she had made the choice to fight for her life, to refuse the terrible fate her father had chosen. And with that choice, the first chapter of her journey began, a journey of fear, courage, and hope. The young Apache girl had entered the forest, and the world around her felt different from anything she had known. The trees were tall and thick, their leaves whispering in the wind. Sunlight barely reached the ground, leaving patches of shadow that danced as the wind moved. The forest smelled of wet earth, pine, and unknown flowers. It was beautiful, but it also felt dangerous. Every step she took, she listened carefully, alert to any sound that could signal danger. Her small body ached from the long run, but her determination was stronger than her fatigue. The first challenge she faced was finding water. Her throat was dry, and she could feel her lips cracking. She remembered the small creek near her village and how refreshing it had been, and now she needed something similar to survive. She walked slowly, following the sound of flowing water she thought she heard in the distance. When she finally found a small stream, she knelt beside it, cupping her hands to drink. The water was cold, almost icy, but it brought relief. She washed her face and hands, feeling slightly revived. Drinking the water reminded her that she had to be careful. She could not let her guard down, even for a moment. As she moved deeper into the forest, the sounds of the world became more vivid. Birds chirped and called to each other, squirrels darted across tree branches, and insects buzzed in the thick undergrowth. At first, these sounds were comforting, but soon they reminded her that the forest was alive, and not all life was friendly. Shadows moved in ways that made her heart race, and every snap of a twig made her jump. She remembered her father's betrayal and felt a mix of fear and anger. She had to survive, not just for herself, but to prove that she could be brave despite what had happened. Night fell again and the forest changed. The warm sunlight was gone, replaced by cold darkness. Strange noises echoed around her. The hoot of an owl, the rustle of small animals in the leaves, and sometimes the distant howl of a coyote. She huddled under a large tree, pulling her small blanket around her shoulders. Her stomach growled. She had eaten only a small piece of bread from her pack. Hunger gnawed at her, but she told herself that she would find something to eat soon. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to rest, but every sound kept her alert. Sleep was difficult when danger felt so close. The following morning, the girl realized she needed food. She knew she could not survive on bread alone. She remembered some of the small plants her mother had taught her to recognize, which were safe to eat. She gathered a few berries and leaves, cautiously tasting them. They were not much, but they gave her strength. As she ate, she noticed tracks in the dirt, footprints of animals or perhaps humans. Her heart raced. Were these signs of danger, or could they lead her to help? She decided to follow them carefully, moving quietly and staying low. Hours passed and the girl felt her legs growing weaker. The forest was vast and she could not see any signs of civilization. Doubts began to creep into her mind. "Am I going the right way?" she whispered to herself. "Will I ever find safety?" The tears she had held back the night before returned, but she wiped them quickly. She could not afford to cry for long. She had to keep moving. Each step required courage, each breath required strength. She realized that surviving meant more than running. It meant thinking, listening, and using every bit of knowledge she had. Suddenly, she heard a noise behind her. She froze, her heart pounding. The sound of footsteps on dry leaves made her pulse race. She ducked behind a thick bush, holding her breath. A man appeared, walking through the trees. He looked rough and tired, but she could not tell if he was dangerous. Her instincts told her to run, but the forest was thick and her legs ached. She stayed hidden, hoping he would pass without noticing her. The minutes felt like hours. Finally, he moved on and she let out a quiet sigh of relief. That encounter reminded her that the world beyond her village was not just frightening, it was unpredictable. The girl continued her journey, learning quickly how to move quietly and avoid danger. She used what she had seen in the forest before, how animals hid, how to use the shadows for cover, and how to listen for approaching footsteps. She began to feel a little more confident, even though fear was always nearby. Each day, she became stronger, smarter, and more aware of the world around her. She realized that the forest, while dangerous, was also teaching her skills she would need to survive. One evening, as the sun began to set, she found a small clearing. In the center was a fallen log that she used as a bench to rest. The sky was painted with shades of orange and pink, a reminder that even in dark times, beauty could exist. She took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill her lungs. She thought about her family, about the betrayal that had pushed her into this unknown world. She promised herself that she would never let anyone control her life again. She would survive, no matter how difficult the journey became. The next day brought new challenges. The girl encountered a steep hill covered in thick roots and rocks. Climbing it was exhausting, but she refused to give up. She stopped frequently to rest, leaning against trees and catching her breath. She remembered the stories her father had once told her, stories of brave warriors who never gave up, even when faced with impossible odds. Those stories gave her strength, and step by step, she reached the top. From there, she could see the forest stretching endlessly before her. The vastness of the world was frightening, but it was also full of possibilities. As she moved forward, she noticed the first signs of human presence in days. A small wooden fence, a path that looked like it had been traveled recently. Her heart leapt with hope. Perhaps there were people nearby who could help her. But she also remembered the man her father had planned to send her to. She could not trust easily. She would need to be cautious, even if help was close. Food continued to be a struggle. She learned to catch small fish from streams and to pick wild plants carefully. She made small traps for rabbits, though she often went hungry when the traps failed. Her body grew stronger from the daily struggle, but her spirit remained fragile. She often whispered to herself, repeating words of encouragement she had heard as a child. "I can survive. I am brave. I will find safety." These words became a shield, giving her courage when fear threatened to overwhelm her. The forest was not only a place of danger, it was also a place of discovery. She learned to notice the subtle signs of animals, how to follow tracks, and how to find clean water. She discovered herbs that could soothe small injuries, and she learned to protect herself from the cold at night using leaves and branches. Each lesson, each small victory gave her hope. She realized that while the world was harsh, it also had ways to support those who were careful and brave. One afternoon, as the girl rested near a stream, she heard a voice calling softly. Her heart skipped a beat, fear and curiosity mingling. She crouched behind a tree, peering into the clearing. A man appeared carrying a horse. He seemed gentle, moving slowly, and he was not looking for her directly. She watched from a distance, unsure whether to approach or hide. Something about him felt different, safer somehow. Her instincts told her to wait, to observe, and to make her next move carefully. The girl realized that this encounter could be important. Perhaps this man could help her, or perhaps he would be another threat. She had learned to trust her instincts, and now was the time to rely on them. She stayed hidden for hours, watching his actions, noting the way he treated the forest and the animals around him. He seemed kind, patient, and aware of his surroundings. For the first time in days, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, not all humans were cruel. As night fell, the girl made a small shelter for herself near the stream. She felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. The forest was still full of dangers, but she was learning to navigate it, to survive it, and to find hope even in difficult circumstances. Her journey was far from over, but she had grown stronger. Each challenge had tested her courage and resilience, and she had survived. She understood now that the world was unpredictable, but she was capable of facing it. The girl lay down that night, listening to the gentle rush of the stream and the soft sounds of the forest. She thought about the man she had seen, about the possibilities that tomorrow might bring. For the first time in many days, she allowed herself to dream, not of the life she had lost, but of the life she could still create. A life where she was free, safe, and in control of her own destiny. She closed her eyes, holding on to hope, and prepared herself for the challenges that the next day would bring. The young Apache girl had been traveling through the forest for many days. She was tired, hungry, and her body ached from the constant movement. Her hands were scraped from climbing over rocks and branches, and her feet were sore from walking through rough terrain. Yet she pressed on, driven by the hope of freedom and safety. Each day she survived gave her a little more courage, and each night she rested just enough to continue her journey. She had learned to trust her instincts, to move quietly, and to find small signs of life that meant she could survive. One morning, as the sun rose and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, she spotted a thin trail winding through the forest. Unlike the chaotic paths she had followed before, this trail seemed deliberate, as if someone had used it often. Her heart raced. Could this trail lead her to people who might help her, or could it lead to danger? She hesitated for a moment, listening carefully to the sounds of the forest. The wind rustled gently through the trees, and the birds sang their morning songs. Encouraged, she decided to follow the path cautiously, keeping low and moving silently. As she followed the trail, she noticed signs of human presence. There were small footprints in the dirt, the remains of a campfire, and a few broken twigs that suggested someone had passed recently. Her excitement mixed with fear. She had learned that humans could be both dangerous and kind. She remembered the man her father had intended her to meet, and she shivered. She would not trust anyone easily, not after all she had endured. But this trail, she sensed, might offer a chance to find safety. She moved carefully, keeping to the shadows and listening for any sound of approach. Hours passed, and the trail led her to a small clearing. There, she saw a figure moving near a modest camp. It was a man, tall and strong, dressed in simple clothing and a wide-brimmed hat that shaded his face. He seemed gentle in his movements, feeding a small fire and checking the supplies beside him. He had a horse tied nearby, calm and patient. The girl crouched behind a tree, watching him from a distance. She felt a strange mixture of curiosity, fear, and hope. Unlike others she had seen on her journey, this man did not seem threatening. She wanted to approach him to ask for help, but fear held her back. What if he was dangerous? What if he turned her over to someone else? She thought of her father and the cruel man he had chosen, and her heart tightened. She had learned to hide, to protect herself, and to trust her instincts. She waited, watching the man carefully. As she observed him, she noticed how he treated the forest and the animals around him. He moved slowly, with respect for the environment, and spoke softly to his horse as if it understood him. Something about him felt different, safer. Finally, when the man moved away from the fire to gather water from a nearby stream, she decided to take a risk. She stepped out from behind the tree, keeping low and moving cautiously toward the clearing. Her heart pounded in her chest, and her hands trembled. She called out softly, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Excuse me, sir." The man turned immediately, his eyes widening slightly in surprise, but instead of anger or suspicion, he showed concern. "Are you all right, little one?" he asked, his voice calm and kind. The girl's fear mingled with relief. She nodded, but tears welled up in her eyes as the memories of betrayal and fear overwhelmed her. She told him, in small, broken sentences, about her father, about running away, and about her need for safety. The man listened carefully, without interrupting, without judging. He nodded slowly, his expression softening. "You're safe now," he said finally. "You don't have to be afraid anymore." The girl's shoulders relaxed slightly, though her tears continued to fall. For the first time in days, she felt a glimmer of hope. Someone understood her pain, and someone was offering protection without asking for anything in return. She had learned to be wary, but something about this man made her believe that not everyone in the world was cruel. The man offered her water and a small piece of bread. She accepted it shakily, grateful for the simple act of kindness. As she ate, she explained more about her journey, the dangers she had faced, and the fear that had driven her into the forest. The man listened carefully, nodding and asking gentle questions. He did not seem shocked or angry, only concerned. His calm presence reassured her, and she began to feel that she could trust him at least a little. After she had rested, the man suggested they move to a safer location. "You shouldn't stay here," he said. "There are others who might not be as kind. I can help you." The girl hesitated, remembering all the betrayals she had faced. But she saw honesty in his eyes and decided to trust him. Together, they moved quietly through the forest, the girl following closely behind the man as he led the way. During the journey, the man taught her a few small things about survival. He showed her how to move quietly, how to find edible plants, and how to notice signs of animals or people nearby. She listened carefully, absorbing every word. Each lesson made her feel stronger, more capable, and more hopeful. She realized that this man was not only protecting her but also helping her grow. For the first time in many days, she felt that she was not just surviving, she was learning to live. As night fell, they found a small clearing where they could set up a temporary camp. The man built a small fire and the girl helped by gathering wood. They shared a simple meal, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the girl felt a sense of normalcy. She spoke to the man about her dreams and hopes, her fears and sadness. He listened patiently, offering comfort and encouragement. She realized that she could speak freely here, without fear of being punished or betrayed. The next morning, the man suggested they continue moving toward a safer place, where they could find shelter and protection. He spoke about towns and settlements nearby, places where the girl could start a new life. She felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. The journey ahead would not be easy, but with this man by her side, she felt she had a chance. She had learned that hope was possible, even after great pain, and that kindness could exist in the world. As they traveled together, the girl began to feel more confident. She walked with a little more strength, carried her belongings more carefully, and noticed the world around her with curiosity instead of fear. The man encouraged her to speak, to ask questions, and to share her thoughts. He treated her as someone capable and brave, not just as a frightened child in need of protection. This respect helped her regain a sense of self-worth that had been crushed by her father's betrayal. One evening, as they rested by a small river, the girl watched the sunset and felt a strange sense of peace. The journey had been long and difficult, but she was no longer alone. She had found someone who cared, someone who would not betray her. She realized that while her past could never be erased, she had the power to shape her future. For the first time, she allowed herself to dream of a life beyond fear, a life where she could be free, happy, and safe. Over the following days, the girl and the man continued traveling together. They encountered small challenges, rough terrain, unpredictable weather, and the occasional wild animal, but they faced them together. The girl learned to trust not only the man but also herself. She discovered that she could make decisions, navigate danger, and find strength even in the hardest moments. Each step forward was a victory. Each day survived was proof of her courage. Finally, after many days of careful travel, they reached a small, peaceful settlement. It was not large, but it offered safety, shelter, and the possibility of a new beginning. The man guided the girl to a place where she could rest and recover fully. She felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had fled betrayal, survived the wilderness, and now found herself in a place where hope was possible. She realized that the kindness of one person could change the course of a life forever. As the girl settled into the settlement, she thought back on her journey, the fear, the hunger, the pain, and the moments of despair. But she also remembered the courage she had found, the lessons she had learned, and the hope she had discovered. She understood that life could be harsh, but it also had moments of beauty and kindness. And with the man by her side, she felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The young Apache girl had survived betrayal, fear, and the wild unknown. She had found safety and hope in the most unexpected place. And though her journey was far from over, she knew that with courage, determination, and the help of kind people, she could build a future that was truly her own. After arriving at the small settlement, the young Apache girl finally had a moment to rest. Her body was tired, her muscles sore, and her spirit still carried the heavy weight of the fear and betrayal she had endured. For days, she had been running through forests, sleeping in the cold and struggling to find food. Now, with the kind cowboy by her side, she felt a tiny spark of safety for the first time. It was not just physical safety, it was emotional as well. She could breathe, she could think, and most importantly, she could start to heal. The cowboy had arranged a small cabin for them, modest but secure. He showed her how to make a simple bed from blankets and cushions, how to keep the cabin warm, and how to keep small supplies of food and water. The girl watched him carefully, learning not just from his instructions but from his calm and patient way of living. He never rushed her, never scolded her for being scared, and never dismissed her feelings. For someone who had been betrayed by the person she trusted most, this kindness was like a gentle light in the darkness. The first few days were difficult. The girl found it hard to eat, even when food was offered. Her stomach had grown accustomed to small amounts, and she was afraid to trust that she could eat freely again. She struggled to sleep through the night, haunted by nightmares of her father and the cruel man she had escaped from. Each sound outside, the wind, an animal moving, the creaking of the cabin, made her heart race. But the cowboy remained patient. He would sit quietly with her, sometimes offering nothing but a hand to hold or a gentle word to soothe her fears. Slowly, she began to feel that the world could be gentle, even if it had once been cruel. During the day, the cowboy taught her small skills that would help her survive in the world. He showed her how to prepare simple meals, how to gather water safely, and how to recognize safe plants. He explained the importance of keeping watch over one's surroundings without being afraid. These lessons were not just about survival, they were about regaining her confidence and independence. The girl began to feel a sense of pride in herself, discovering that she could accomplish tasks she had never imagined. Each small success made her feel stronger and more capable. Beyond practical skills, the cowboy also helped the girl deal with her emotions. He listened when she wanted to talk about her father, when she cried over her lost childhood, or when she felt hopeless about the future. He never interrupted, never judged, and never tried to rush her through her pain. His patience helped her understand that it was okay to feel hurt, scared, or sad. Healing, he seemed to show her, was not about forgetting what had happened. It was about learning to carry the past without letting it control the present. As the days passed, the girl began to explore the settlement. She walked through the small streets, observing people who smiled, worked, and helped one another. It was different from the life she had known in her village, but it was not frightening. She began to see that not all people were cruel or selfish. Some were kind, some were patient, and some were willing to help strangers in need. These small observations gave her hope. She realized that the world was not entirely full of danger, and that there were places where she could belong. One morning, the cowboy suggested they take the horse out to the nearby fields. The girl had never ridden a horse before, and at first, she was hesitant. Her legs trembled as she approached the animal, and her hands shook as she touched its mane. But the cowboy stayed close, offering encouragement and guidance. Slowly, she climbed onto the horse, her fear giving way to a mixture of excitement and wonder. The horse moved steadily beneath her, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of freedom she had not known in a long time. She realized that bravery was not the absence of fear, but the choice to keep going despite it. The days turned into weeks, and with each passing day, the girl grew stronger, physically, emotionally, and mentally. She could walk longer distances, carry heavier loads, and perform tasks with more confidence. She laughed more often, played small games with children in the settlement, and began to dream about her future. The cowboy watched her progress with pride, understanding that her journey was not just about survival, but about reclaiming her life. He offered guidance and protection, but he also allowed her space to make decisions, to explore, and to grow. The girl began to understand that healing was a process. It was not something that could be rushed or forced. Some days were harder than others, and she sometimes felt a wave of sadness or fear. But each time, she found that she had more strength to face it than she had before. She learned to be patient with herself, to take small steps forward, and to appreciate the moments of peace and joy that life offered. The cowboy's presence reminded her that trust could be rebuilt, that kindness could exist, and that she was not alone in the world. During this time, the girl also reflected on her past. She thought about her father, the betrayal, and the fear that had driven her into the forest. She realized that while she could not change the past, she could decide how to live in the present. She could choose to be brave, to trust again, and to build a life that belonged to her. The cowboy never pushed her to forgive or forget, but his example showed her that healing was possible when someone offered patience, respect, and understanding. One evening, as they sat by the fire, the girl spoke to the cowboy about her dreams. She wanted to travel, to see the world beyond the forest and the settlement. She wanted to learn, to help others, and to live a life free from fear. The cowboy listened carefully, nodding with encouragement. "You can do it," he said softly. "You have the strength and you have the courage. Never let anyone take that away from you." His words were simple, but they resonated deeply. The girl realized that she had found not just safety, but guidance, and that her journey of healing and growth had only just begun. The settlement became a place of learning and rebuilding for her. She helped with small chores, learned how to cook meals, and even began to teach herself reading from a small book the cowboy had given her. Each accomplishment brought a sense of pride. She was no longer just the frightened girl who had fled from danger. She was becoming someone capable, strong, and resilient. The cowboy continued to encourage her independence, showing her that freedom was not just about escaping danger. It was about learning to live fully and with confidence. As months passed, the girl realized that she had changed. The fear that had once dominated her life had been replaced with courage. The sorrow that had once weighed on her heart had been softened by hope, and the loneliness that had haunted her was now eased by friendship and trust. She still remembered her past, but she no longer let it define her. She had survived the wilderness, found a kind protector, and learned to believe in herself. Each day was a small victory, a step toward a future she could shape with her own hands. The cowboy and the girl continued to grow close, not in any way that was inappropriate, but as a bond built on trust, respect, and mutual care. He became a mentor, a guardian, and a friend. She learned to rely on him for guidance, but also to trust her own judgment. Their relationship became a source of strength for her, showing that human connection could be gentle, supportive, and empowering. The girl began to see that while the world could be cruel, it could also be kind, and she had the power to seek out that kindness for herself. Finally, after months of healing and learning, the girl stood at the edge of the forest, looking toward the horizon. She realized that she was no longer the frightened child who had fled in tears. She was a young woman, capable of facing challenges, making decisions, and shaping her own destiny. She had learned that bravery was not just about escaping danger, but about growing stronger, trusting oneself, and finding hope even after pain. The cowboy stood beside her, quietly offering support, but allowing her the space to recognize her own strength. The young Apache girl had transformed. From a frightened child betrayed by her own father, she had grown into a resilient, brave, and hopeful young woman. She had survived fear, hunger, and loneliness, and she had learned to trust again. With the cowboy's guidance and her own determination, she had discovered the power of patience, courage, and kindness. She now faced the future with confidence, ready to explore the world, to create a life of her own, and to continue growing into the person she was meant to be. After months of healing, learning, and growing stronger, the young Apache girl finally felt ready to face the world. Beyond the small settlement, the forest behind her held memories of fear, struggle, and loneliness, but it also reminded her of her courage and determination. She had survived countless challenges, discovered her inner strength, and learned to trust herself. The cowboy, who had guided her and protected her through the most difficult times, now stood beside her, giving her the space to step confidently into the next chapter of her life. The first step was leaving the settlement behind, a place that had offered safety, but was not yet the life she dreamed of. The girl packed her small belongings carefully, taking only what she truly needed: a few clothes, some food for the journey, and a small book that the cowboy had given her to encourage learning. She looked back at the cabin one last time, feeling gratitude for the protection and guidance it had provided. Then, taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, ready to explore the larger world that awaited her. The journey to a town beyond the hills was not easy. The girl had grown stronger and more capable, but traveling through forests, fields, and rivers still required skill and caution. She remembered the lessons the cowboy had taught her: how to read the signs of nature, how to find safe water, and how to stay alert for danger. Each step she took reminded her of her resilience. She had escaped betrayal, survived the wilderness, and now she could move confidently, knowing she was capable of facing the unknown. As they approached the first signs of human settlement, the girl felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The distant smoke of chimneys and the faint sound of voices reminded her that people could be kind, helpful, and understanding. But she also remembered the cruelty she had faced from her father and the man he had chosen for her. Her trust had been broken once, and she was cautious now. Yet, the cowboy's presence reassured her. She realized that while the past had been painful, it did not define her future. She could choose how to interact with the world, and she could decide to embrace hope instead of fear. The town they reached was small, with dusty streets, wooden buildings, and people going about their daily lives. Children played near the town square, merchants sold fruits and vegetables, and neighbors greeted each other warmly. The girl watched from a distance at first, taking in the sights and sounds. She felt a strange mixture of wonder and hesitation. The town was different from her village, yet it offered the possibility of a new life, a life of freedom, safety, and opportunity. The cowboy guided her to a safe house in the town, explaining that they would stay there for a while until she could feel confident moving on her own. Inside, the girl felt a sense of relief and security. She could rest without fear of danger or betrayal. The people in the safe house were kind and welcoming, offering her food, warm clothing, and a place to sleep. She realized that the world contained good people, and that kindness could be found even in unexpected places. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to feel hopeful. During her time in the town, the girl began to rebuild her life. She learned new skills, practiced reading and writing, and discovered the joy of simple routines. Each day, she grew more independent and confident. The cowboy encouraged her to explore her abilities and to dream about the life she wanted to lead. He reminded her that her past did not limit her future, and that she had the power to create a life filled with purpose, joy, and safety. One afternoon, the girl visited the town market. She marveled at the colorful fruits and vegetables, the laughter of children, and the friendly chatter of neighbors. It was a simple scene, but for her, it was extraordinary. She realized that life could be ordinary and beautiful, even after everything she had endured. She interacted with the townspeople cautiously at first, but soon she discovered that many were willing to offer help, guidance, and friendship. Each small interaction strengthened her confidence and reinforced her belief in the possibility of a better life. The cowboy continued to guide her, but he also encouraged her independence. He helped her understand that freedom was not just escaping danger, it was the ability to make choices, to learn, and to shape her own destiny. The girl began to dream more vividly about her future. She imagined learning new skills, exploring new places, and perhaps helping others who had faced hardships similar to hers. These dreams gave her strength, motivation, and a sense of purpose she had not known before. One day, while walking through the town, the girl saw a group of children playing near the river. She paused, watching them laugh and run freely. Memories of her own childhood came rushing back, days filled with laughter, songs, and simple joys. She realized that, although she had lost part of her childhood to fear and betrayal, she still had the power to reclaim happiness. She stepped forward and joined the children in their games. For the first time in years, she laughed freely, feeling the lightness of joy in her heart. As weeks turned into months, the girl grew stronger, wiser, and more self-assured. She no longer felt the weight of fear and betrayal pressing down on her. She had learned to trust herself, to recognize kindness, and to navigate challenges with courage. The cowboy remained a guiding presence, offering advice and support, but allowing her to make decisions for herself. She understood that true freedom came not from relying on others entirely, but from combining independence with the wisdom of those who cared for her. Eventually, the girl decided to step even further into her independence. She began to explore work opportunities in the town, helping at small shops, learning new skills, and interacting with a broader range of people. Each task she accomplished gave her confidence and a sense of pride. She realized that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. Her past, filled with fear and betrayal, had shaped her resilience, and now that resilience was guiding her toward a future she could control. The cowboy watched her progress with quiet pride. He had helped her find safety, taught her survival skills, and offered guidance, but the girl's growth and courage were entirely her own. She had faced her fears, endured hardships, and emerged stronger and wiser. The bond between them was one of respect, trust, and care. He knew that she was ready to face the world on her own, to continue her journey with courage and independence. One evening, the girl stood at the edge of the town, looking out at the horizon. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the buildings, fields, and distant hills. She thought about her journey, the betrayal of her father, the nights spent hiding in the forest, the fear and hunger she had endured, and the moments of hope she had discovered along the way. She realized that every step, every struggle had led her to this moment of freedom and possibility. The girl knew that her past would always be a part of her, but it would no longer define her. She had survived, she had grown, and she had learned that courage, kindness, and determination could overcome even the darkest challenges. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the cowboy who had guided her, protected her, and believed in her when she struggled to believe in herself. But she also recognized the strength within herself, the resilience, courage, and wisdom that had allowed her to survive and grow. With a deep breath, the girl stepped forward, ready to embrace her new life. She would continue to explore, learn, and build a future filled with hope and opportunity. She understood that life would still have challenges, but she now had the strength to face them. She was no longer the frightened child who had fled in tears. She was a young woman who had overcome fear, betrayal, and hardship, ready to create a life of her own choosing. As she walked toward the future, the girl felt the warmth of the sun on her face and the gentle breeze in her hair. She thought of the lessons she had learned, the kindness she had received, and the courage she had discovered within herself. She realized that life could be beautiful, even after pain, and that hope was always possible for those who refused to give up. She looked forward to new adventures, new friendships, and new opportunities to grow and thrive. The young Apache girl had completed a journey from despair to hope, from fear to courage, and from loneliness to connection. She had faced betrayal, danger, and uncertainty, yet she had survived and grown stronger because of it. She had learned the power of trust, kindness, and resilience, and she had discovered that her past, while painful, could not stop her from building a brighter future. With a final glance at the town that had offered her safety and the horizon that promised endless possibilities, the girl smiled. She was free, strong, and ready. Her journey was far from over, but she was no longer running from fear. She was moving toward hope, independence, and a life of her own making. And with that, the young Apache girl stepped into her new beginning, carrying courage, wisdom, and hope with every step.